Check this out. I've got this crossbow that I'm going to be upgrading through Masterworking, and there's two stats on it that are very similar. There's the 120% greater affix vulnerable damage, and there's the 92% tempered vulnerable damage. And when we upgrade this 4 times on the 4th roll, it's going to upgrade one stat by 25%. Now, if you had a choice between which one of those vulnerable damage rolls to upgrade, the 120% one or the 92% one, which one would you choose? Now, you might want to pause the video and think about it for a moment, or I also put some choices down here if that helps you out. So, which is better to 25% upgrade on that 4th roll? A, upgrade the 120% vulnerable because, well, the number's bigger, duh. B, upgrade the 92% vulnerable because I actually think A, but I'm double guessing myself now. Or C, upgrade the 92% vulnerable. Or D, either one is the same. Do you guys have a guess? Well, if you do, the answer might surprise you. What if I told you that the answer was C, upgrade the 92% vulnerable? Did that surprise you? If so, this video is for you, and you're going to learn something that is going to help you out quite a bit and help really maximize those roles from Masterworking. Okay, now, how do we know this? Now, you might not believe me, but I will show you, and by the end of this video, you will be convinced that it is in fact 92%. And to do that, instead of showing you this right away in game, I'm gonna show you something else in game that might surprise you. Okay, so what I have here set up is, if we look here, I can upgrade this, and when I upgrade it, it's going to increase all of the values by 5%. So let's see, how much do we think that it would upgrade all of these values by if it upgrades it by 5%? So what we have to do is we have to multiply all the values by 1.05. Then we get 189 dex, 1,587.6, which I'm guessing we'll probably round up to 150 or 1,588. And then the 120 vulnerable, multiply that by 1.05, and that would give us 126 vulnerable on the first roll. 92 times 1.05 gives us 96.6 vulnerable, 61.95 for the Heartseeker. All right, so now let's see what we actually get in a game. I hit upgrade here, and here's what we get. So let's now compare this to what we thought we should have gotten. All right, so we can see that we got 189 dex, just as we predicted, about 1,588 max life. We got 124 vulnerable damage. Wait a minute, but we thought we should have got 126. We got the same amount of vulnerable on the temper roll, and we got the same amount on our Heartseeker roll. So notice on the greater affix roll, we did not actually just get a multiplied by 1.05. So that's kind of weird, right? We got less than we expected. So what's going on here? Well, what actually gets upgraded in Masterworking is the base roll. What do I mean by the base roll? Well, this 120% vulnerable damage, it's not actually 120% in a sense. It is actually, we could break this up, it is actually an 80% vulnerable is the base. So that would be like the maximum possible vulnerable roll that you could get on a two-handed weapon there. And then plus the 40% greater affix. So the greater affix is going to give you 50% more of the stat. So 50% of 80 is 40%. So what actually is getting masterworked increased by 1.05 is actually the 80% roll, the base roll. So if we take 80% times 1.05, then what do we get? We get 84%. Okay. And then if we add the greater affix roll to it, 40%, well then what do we get? Well, that plus 40 gives us 124%, which is what we see in game, 124% there. So the key thing to realize is that masterworking always works off of the base percentage, not the total percent. Okay? And if we were to say upgrade this again by another 5%, well, you might think that we would take all of these values again and multiply those by 1.05, all of the upgraded values. So if we did that, for example, what would we get? Well, that 1,588, that would become about 1,667.4, and our 124% vulnerable greater affix roll, if I multiply that by 1.05, then that would become 130.2. Well, let's see what we would actually get in game. All right, so now we can see that we did not get that 1,667 health. We actually get 1,663 life. And for the vulnerable, we did not end up at 130.2, we ended up at 128. And that is because each time you masterwork, it doesn't work off of the previous value, it works off of the original 0 out of 12. It upgrades this by 5% and then adds that to the previous value. So 1,512 times 5% is about 76 life. It's like 75.6. So 5% of that is about 76 life here. And that's why if we look and see, well, if I take 1,512, add 76, well, then I get 1,588. And then if I add 76 again, then I get 1,663. Well, here it's actually adding 75 because it's rounding a little bit, because this is really 75.6 life. So each time you upgrade, it upgrades this amount by 5%. And the same thing happens with your Masterwork crit rolls, is that it's only going to be upgrading this by 25%, not the previous roll, what you started with. And for greater affixes, it's always going to upgrade the 80%, not the 120%, which is why when we take 5% of 80, that is 4%. Which is why when we look and see, well, 120 after 1, it becomes 124. After 2 rolls, it becomes another additional 4 of 128. So for the 25% roll, if we go back to this, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to take 25% of 80%. And that is going to give you 20% more vulnerable versus 25% of 92%. That is going to give you 0.25 times 92. That gives us 23%. So it is actually better to be upgrading the 92% because that's what gets upgraded, not the 120%. And one thing that's also kind of interesting is I ran a poll to see what did you guys think before this, and here are the results. So as we can see here, most people thought that it's better to upgrade the 120% and not the 92%. So this definitely seemed like something that people are a little confused about. Hopefully this helps you guys out. If you found this video helpful and you feel like this has brought some value to your gaming experience and that you can make better decisions now, then feel free to hit that like and subscribe, and hopefully I can do this again later on. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.